Sports, My Love Language. It's Complicated by Kim Davis. Thank you for joining us. This Sports Extra Extra, and Kim Davis joins me here in the KHOU 11 News studios.
I love this studio, by the way.
This is pretty cool.
It's very cool.
And now this is very cool to
Thank you.
have a book, your first book,
My first book,
because that means you're not stopping here.
of course.
How long was the process, and why did you ultimately decide I want to write a book?
So I'm a writer and a big reader. And so for years and years, my mother and my best friend Zena, who you now know,
Yes, Zena
I
Garrison.
said, you should be writing books, right? So actually the process, I probably wrote the book in a couple weeks, but the process was years because I've written it over like 10 times. And it's because initially I thought I'm going to write a book and tell a story about the journey because people always ask me. But then it was tough for me as a journalist, 'cause that's basically what I am,
Yeah.
to like, hey, and now look at me. It felt very self-serving. And I had to find a way, how do I tell this story so that it can benefit somebody else? And then, as you go on in your career, and I'm also an entrepreneur and a speaker, all the books should be about one of your keynotes. And you get all this input. And finally, I came back to just write the book. There'll be others. And tell the story and tell it in a way that maybe it can help somebody else with whatever they're doing. They don't have to go into sports or TV. I don't do that. But, it can hopefully be helpful. And so that's why I wrote the book.
But I do find that it's in some ways, I don't want to call it a manual, but I think it is a guidebook
Yeah.
for those who are interested in getting into the sports broadcasting media landscape. Also, a woman
Yeah.
or a person of color.
Absolutely.
Was that really in the forefront of your mind when you were putting this all together throughout these years of trying to get this done?
It actually was, Jason. And also, I wanted people to understand what you see when you see somebody on television, when they look at you, what they're looking at is the end of a whole lot of work.
Yep.
You don't just wake up and do it. And you're always learning and growing, or you should be. Now, I know that I'm kind of a relic in the industry, right? Because of the way I started and went through and learned and wanted to learn to write and produce and edit so that I could be a better storyteller. I want people to know, do those things. And one, make sure you even like this stuff. Be good at your craft. And it can translate into so many other things outside of media. But media, if you want to be good at media and not just what I call the, hey, look at me, I'm on TV, it requires some things. And I wanted to show people that.
Yeah, we see that a lot, I think.
Yeah.
You and I. And one thing that's in the book, and I believe that I have the quote right, is that you don't rise to the occasion, you rise to your level of preparation.
Absolutely.
And I just think that you're so right that it's so much about preparation, and it's so much also about showing up, just showing up, being prepared and being on time.
Right.
Because that sometimes is just 50% of the battle.
That absolutely is it. And being prepared is just that. It's all those things you said. So it helps you do what you do better. And the people that you're going and you're showing up with, the teams, the players, the front office, the equipment guys, they see it. They know you're prepared and they deal with you accordingly. And so it's not about them judging you, but they appreciate it. No one's ever going to come and say, hey, Kim, I'm glad that you knew something about me. But you get the respect, which is really all I ever wanted. I wanted the professional respect along with the opportunity. And so what I can do is I can control the preparation, right? I can control that, how I show up, and how I look when I show up. I'm often talking to women, and I'm careful now because we're in a different era, but put some clothes on. I'm sorry. It's a job. And even when it's hot, it was 1,000 degrees outside today, but you still have to look like you're going to work.
No, I agree with you. I agree. And of course, here with Kim Davis, journalist, broadcaster, storyteller, as we are talking about her first book, Sports, My Love Language, It's Complicated. There are some things in this book that when I looked at it, there were some things, and I know we know each other pretty well.
Pretty well, yeah.
And I was like, wow, your mother earned a master's degree at the age of 21.
All the pressure.
And how much was she was raising a family at that time, right? Or no?
My oldest sister would have been born by then.
Yeah. And then Your father was on the first football team at Texas Southern?
Yes, he loved Texas Southern University. He grew up in Third Ward, and I claim Third Ward, although I lived in the Braeswood area for a period. He loved Yates. He went to Ryan Yates, TSU, and I didn't know this until my father's funeral. But my father gave out 50 scholarships over his adult life to young people to attend TSU, and I found out at his funeral when one of his friends was talking about and I'm like, "What?" It was amazing. He was very, stern and unassuming, sense of humor, but you would have never thought that. He never talked about it. I'm like, "Mom, did you know that?" She was like, "Yeah, I don't remember that."
Wow. And obviously, him being in football, and you talk about one theme of the book is also, I think it's our upbringing and how it shapes us and molds us. But your love of sports, I
Yeah.
assume you owe a lot of that to your father.
Absolutely. I grew up listening to talk radio. We read the newspaper every day. It was kind of required in our home. Grew up in Houston, so there were 2 newspapers. You had to read
Yep.
them. I read sports, hung out with my dad because he got off earlier, and he listened to sports talk radio. I mean, I was watching golf on TV as a kid. It was normal to me, and baseball on and listening to radio. My grandmother listened to baseball on the radio. And so, yeah, it's what I knew, and it was just pretty normal for me.
And part of your journey is that you come to a certain TV station for an internship here at KHOU. And I think we all have this attitude like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for the world.
Right.
And what happens to you?
I come for this internship, and the person I talked to says to me, "Yeah, I think you should change your major. There's no future for you in television, and so you can't be an intern here," which meant you can't work for free here. And I was like, thinking, "Is he serious?" But think about how many people would have just been done. But I met someone.
Especially, it's one thing if they're maybe someone, a neighbor down the street, or
Right,
your aunt or your distant uncle or something like that, but someone who is clearly
in the
in the
business.
business and has an administrative position.
Yeah, it was disappointing, and so I went back and I told my sister, and she was like, "Well, let me call this guy." So this friend of hers, Tom Neely, he goes, "Oh, let me call Carolyn Campbell." And they had just started a consumer hotline. It was to kind of compete with what Marvin Zindler was doing. And Carolyn said, "Well, you can be an intern here." So I come over to the consumer hotline. I'm an intern. I'm walking down the hall one day and I see him, this man that told me I should change my major. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm an intern." And because as you know, I work all the time.
Mhm.
I would go to the newsroom and I learned to write, edit, and pack people's, their gear. So they always would like, yeah, let Kim come with us. And so that's how I got to be an intern in news and sports.
And that's really an important lesson as well for anyone who may be watching this and wants to share it with someone who wants to get into this industry. The more you can do, the better off you're going to be. Growing up, I was all about sports, 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 but I also realized that you have to be well read in a bunch of different things
Yes.
because you just never know when you're going to get thrown into some other type of world. And you have to be able
Yeah.
to go. My favorite, or my idol in broadcasting, was Bob Costas, is Bob Costas,
Okay.
because
Oh my
he's
gosh.
think of how many people can do a sportscast, then go down the hall, anchor a nightly news show, and then possibly go and host Saturday Night Live. Like, that was
Not
the
many.
is the type of talent that Bob Costas during his prime was. And a book like this is a very good blueprint on what you need to do or know to get in this business, and not just be in the business, but actually carve out a career, because it is, you talk about having passion. If you don't have
Yeah.
passion for this stuff, because of the hours and the days of the week that you often have to work, you have to have that, because if you don't, you're
Not
not going to
gonna
be
make
in it
it.
very long. How many birthdays and anniversaries and parties have you missed?
Well, we
Because
work nights and
yeah,
weekends. All the cool stuff happens
yeah,
nights and weekends, right? And holidays. If you want to cover the things that are, and you can't just show up, right? You either be around for the not so sexy stuff, right? Practices and camps and, different things. Just so one that you're prepared, you got to see things and get to know people and have conversations. And because our industry is under attack, we've got to be better now, right? So that people can trust us, And so I'm always saying to people, vet where you get your information and find people that you can trust who do the work so that when you listen to them, you don't have to worry about, is it real? And I think that's important.
And media is much like I often compare it to minor league baseball because very rarely do people start out in a big league city like Houston or Dallas. And you started out in a very small place,
Right.
right? Your first job. What was that
Well,
experience
so I
like
started in Houston, but
in
I had a
Houston?
bunch of jobs,
Okay,
right? So I was
well,
writing.
how about how about this as an anchor or a
Right.
reporter?
I went to Decatur, Illinois, and I had been to Chicago a lot and covered stuff there, doing things with BT and writing for the paper. I had no idea what Central Illinois was like, and I was like, "Where am I?" But I learned so much, right? I learned how to really produce and to back time, which people have no idea what that is, where you're on the set, you're watching the clock and you're back timing from the clock. You're not, there's no computer
Yeah,
telling you any of
yeah,
that. And then when I would do sports in a smaller market, you are the producer, you're the
yep.
anchor, you're usually the editor. You learn everything and it's invaluable. Now, I didn't want to be there 3 years. I was there 2 years and 9 months. I said basically 3 winters. That's how I called it. But it was one of the best things I could have done in
Yeah.
my career.
Yeah, no, I agree. My first job was in Bridgeport, West Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, and then I was fortunate enough to go to Syracuse, where I'm from, but again, the ride that people take, it's never the direction you think it's going to go, I assume. How quick? Because you were in New Orleans, right?
Right. I was in New
So what
Orleans.
was your path then?
So so once I went to Decatur, I came back and worked in Houston. And then I got a
Now that's impressive.
right.
That doesn't happen very often.
This happened very often. And it was funny because before I went to Decatur, I had done some work with JB, who was at Fox then, but CBS Sports. We'd done things at BET together. And we used to talk, and he was like, Kim, you shouldn't have to go to a little market. You have all this experience. And I said, yeah, but I keep getting close to these jobs. I think I need to get that. So he's like, I want you to talk to Robin because she's a woman, Robin Roberts.
Mhm.
She could probably better understand. I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, I think I gotta do this." So I go there, and then when I get back to Houston, I'm here. And then I did Comets Radio, a broadcast team, a couple of championships, and I called the news director in New Orleans that I had never met, but over the years of me looking for jobs, had talked to her. So I had a friend looking for a news reporter position, and they had an opening. So I said, "Let me call Paula." And I said, "Hey, Paula, you guys still looking for a news reporter? Because I wanna send somebody to you." And she said, we don't have that job, but I've been trying to find you. We have an opening for a 5 o'clock sports anchor. And I was thinking, I'm not calling about that. She goes, well, Kim, we don't have that job. I've been looking for you, and I think this is great. And that's really how the whole thing started, how I ended up going to New Orleans.
Do you miss the grind, the day-to-day grind of many people will call it legacy media, but or
Right.
traditional media?
So I don't, because I have a grind in my business and because I do still so much. And because the whole is smaller, there's not a lot of chances to tell stories and do like, we used to do more shows, live shows, and that doesn't exist now. So I don't miss that. But I
Mm.
do miss being on every day with some of the, with my team, because I've had some great teams that I worked with in terms of photographers and editors and other reporters. I miss that part of it.
Also in the book, Sports, My Love Language, it's complicated. You mention about connecting with your why, and it serves with your compass as your compass, reminding you of your motivation. Does your why has it changed over the years, do you think? Or is it still a pretty consistent or constant why?
It's probably consistent. It's probably evolved some. I think it's important. I think my voice is necessary. I think perspective matters. I think a word that people hate now is diversity, but it's diversity of thought and perspective and opinion. And I think we all bring something different to the table. And I think it's needed. And I used to tell people I can sit next to a person in the press box and we watch the same play unfold we could have a very different take on it, which is why you need these different voices and people talking about what we see and what happens. Because at the end of the day, we're telling stories about people, to people. And if you take the people part out, you're missing it. And so I don't think the why has changed. Maybe I'm still growing up.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I look at it that I think evolution is a good way of framing it because
Yeah.
for me it's always been about the stories and I love telling stories. But we see that changing in the industry now
We do
a
see it
lot.
changing a lot. And I often have people say, Kim, you don't talk about yourself enough. So I'm not the story. And I'm not, as you know, I'm not shy
No.
or an introvert, but I was never, that's not how I was trained. It's not my understanding of what we do. And so I do have to get better at talking about, hey, I'm out here and I do these things because it's necessary now. But yeah, I shouldn't have three stand-ups in a minute package.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's too much.
A lot of technical talk there, but stand-ups are the reporter speaks and
On
on
camera.
camera and does their thing. I'm always curious when someone writes a book. I always seem to go back to this question. Was there any part of the book that you found difficult to write for whatever reason? Maybe it was too revealing. You didn't want to perhaps expose yourself or someone else or I mean, I know it's really not that
Yeah.
kind of book, but in some ways, did you find any part of it difficult for you to write?
So the only parts were, when I talked about some of the challenges, um, I don't know if it was difficult, but I had to really think about it because I never wanted to seem like I was complaining
Mm,
about the journey because I knew what I was signing up for. When I started this, there weren't many women. There certainly weren't many Black women. I could count them. And I knew that. And so I still said, yep, I want to do this and I'm willing to put in the work. So I didn't want to, while sharing the story, do the whole woe is me. And that maybe was a struggle because I don't think I did that, but that was a real concern for me. I never wanted to come off like, poor me, I had this hard time.
I understand that. I mean, framing is everything,
Yeah.
and you don't want people to think that you're complaining. Zena Garrison is part of this book, the forward in the
Yes.
book. Uh, what has your relationship with her meant to you? Not just your career, but personally. I know that you were a big tennis player growing up and you played collegiately, but your relationship with Zena, um, I imagine that's evolved as well as the two
Yeah.
of you have gotten older.
Yeah,
Not too old, but a
oh,
little
yeah,
bit
not
older.
too she's older than me, though, but anyway, yeah, it has evolved, she has I can't remember her not being my friend, we've been friends since we were 10,
Wow.
best friends, and through lots of things, I've seen lots of her highs and lows, and she's done the same, and, some of the stories about her, I'm always just impressed. I remember I'm like, "Yeah, this is pretty special, Zena," and I one of the ones is about, had to do with Sun City in South Africa when she was offered to go play in a exhibition in the middle of apartheid, and they offered her $1,000,000. It's a lot of money now, but it was a lot of money
Mhm.
back then, and she turned it down, and, she talked with Arthur Ashe, who we got a chance to know, and he's like, "There's no way you can go," and she never thought twice about it, and to me, I'm always telling that story about her because that sums up who she is, and so just the things that she dealt with going through in the tennis world, on a professional level and even getting to that level, we share a lot, but she's like my sister,
Mhm.
um, and except she doesn't try to boss me around as much. I probably boss her around more.
And you were one heck of a tennis player. Unfortunately, an unfortunate
Oh,
incident,
yeah.
injury. Um, do you ever think about what could have been or what was or where you could have gone with tennis? Does that ever at this point?
At this point, it doesn't. I do think about not being able to wear stiletto heels because that that ankle surgery really, changed some things, and I've had 3 surgeries total on my ankle, but I really don't. If I had
Could you have played professionally, do you think?
so I don't know. I started late, but
Mhm.
I made some leaps pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Who knows?
Yeah.
And it wasn't as clear as like a Xena, who,
Yeah.
when I started, was one of the, like the number one player in the world. So I don't know. I don't know if I could have, but what I do know is I would have probably not been able to get into the industry I'm in because it gave me a chance to then go and, work at the TV station in Bryan, Texas. I got a chance to study abroad in Spain, and those things wouldn't have happened. So I guess I've just really tried to not focus on that. But I have some people that will say, "Yeah, man, because you could have been pro." I'm like, hold on. That's that may be pushing it a little bit, but who knows? You know?
Another quote that's mentioned in the book is, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great."
Yes.
Why does that resonate with you so much?
Because it's often about getting started. Just go. Like, even with this book, for me, it was finishing. I finally had to say, "You know what? Just finish it." Not throw it together, but just finish it and move on to the next thing. Start what's next. Because otherwise you get stuck in a place, and I'm doing this, I'm trying to make this right. And so getting started is sometimes the thing I have to really focus on.
Yeah, I understand that. This idea of chasing perfection
Right.
is also something that a lot of people in our industry deal with, that I deal with, that sometimes perfection is like the biggest obstacle to accomplishment, because if
Right.
you're just focused on making sure that I have the right word, or the sentence doesn't flow the way I
Yeah.
want it. Did you run into that with the book?
So what
I mean, I know this is not the first version because you sent me a version of it.
oh my gosh. And I was like, what is that I sent him? I've probably done 10 of these. But for me, it's really I have changed with maturity and growth over the years. And instead of pursuing really perfection, is pursuing excellence, because I always want to have that. I got that from my parents, and I think that's different from perfection. I think we should pursue excellence. You should be excellent in what you do. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but always try to strive and be excellent.
So this is mentioned, or you've mentioned that this is the first book.
Yes,
Have you already thought about a second book?
I have
And
several
have
books
you
in my
worked?
head,
Okay, yep. You're
right?
not like, nothing is clearly defined in terms of, okay, I
Well,
got
so there's one,
okay.
and because it's a documentary I wanted to do forever, and I'm like, well, but if I don't have the resources for that now, just make it a book first. And the name of it is, um, when the crowd stops cheering.
Mm,
And in a nutshell, it is we've read the books and seen the stories about the players who go broke. So it's not that story.
yeah.
But it is about the player who, when he or she finishes their career, and it's mostly he, because the revenue sport, they still have a lot of money. Maybe he's 28 and he retires and he doesn't know how to be. And here's what that sometimes looks like. I used to hang out at this place called Smith and Linsky's. It was my cheers.
Hmm.
And I'm there one week and they're having a fundraiser. So a lot of players there, they're donating their jerseys for some charity, framed up and stuff. I'm there the next week and there's a guy, a player, a retired player, and he's got his jersey in this big frame and it's posted against the bar. So I said to the bartender, "You guys having another event?" He goes, "No." He just always brings that when he comes, because when he walks into a room, if I don't have this big thing, nobody knows who I am, and they don't know how to be. I wanna tell those stories. I think it's important. So that's the one.
Interesting. How much further can women's sports like the WNBA go? Because it appears to many that it's centered around one player.
Yes, and that's unfortunate that people think that. Caitlin Clark has been an amazing addition to the W. But, I covered the WNBA when they had a great TV package. Comets sold out. They had some of the best TV ratings. The Comets are still among those ratings, and so it's not new. So people who just kind of got back reintroduced to the WNBA have created, I think, a bit of havoc. But it's a great product, and I don't know how far. The revenue. I've had people had me come on some national shows and talk about the men make so much more, and I really hate that conversation. It's not realistic. It's apples and oranges. Where's the money coming from? The season's shorter. The TV revenue's not there. I mean, so where does the revenue come from? I have no idea. I mean, look how long it took for tennis in the majors to have the same prize money as the men, but you've got to generate it. So I hope that it continues to grow. I think there's so much more around it. I mean, look at now, even girls flag football.
I was thinking of that myself. That appears to be the next frontier, maybe, in
Absolutely.
sports?
Absolutely. I moderated this panel with Hannah McNair. The Texans had a kind of a combine for the
Mhm.
girls around the state a few months ago. And she's Hannah McNair and the Texans Foundation is really pushing, trying to get this in schools across the districts and across the state, and that it becomes, sanctioned, certified, and all that UIL. One of the young ladies who was at that combine came up to me. I was doing something a few weeks ago, and she's like, "You look so familiar." I don't think it's from TV though. And so then I said, "Did you go to the combine?" She goes, "That's right. You're the one that was moderating. I remember the voice." She has now gotten a scholarship to go and play a 4-year scholarship or an annual
Sure.
scholarship, girls flag football, the first from her school at Westbury High School. I mean, how cool is that, right? So who knows? If they had girls flag football, maybe I would have been a journalist. I would have been a professional football player.
I do know this, that the book is Sports, My Love Language, It's Complicated by Kim Y. Davis.
Yes. Yes.
Talked a lot, but of course, we can always hear you and see you on Sports Extra when you
Absolutely.
thankfully come in and help us. So each Sunday, whenever you're on, we really appreciate it. And I enjoyed the book, and I think most people out there will get something out of the book, especially if you know someone who's interested in becoming a broadcaster, a journalist, someone in the communications field. And I think that it's a good read, and I encourage everyone to
Yeah.
read it. And it was a pleasure to have you here on this Sports Extra
You
Extra.
and I talk all the time, so I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. This is super cool. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Kim.